Hey, it's good to see you today. My name is Philip Thomas, pastor of Journey here in Elgin, Texas, and thank you so much again for joining us as we continue our Journey Through Scripture podcast. This is our Thursday edition, and we are back into 2 Samuel today. So we'll be in 2 Samuel chapters 13 through 18. So 2 Samuel 13 through 18. We'll also read Psalm 3 and Psalm 7. All right. So we ended last Tuesday with the death of David's son that he had with Bathsheba. We talked about David's failings with Bathsheba and how he had Uriah killed. Chapter 12 ends with Solomon being born from Bathsheba. So he will be the eventual king. So isn't that interesting how out of all of that circumstance that God was very displeased with, that it was through Bathsheba that Solomon is born, who continues the Davidic line of the monarchy, and we see kind of where David continues his military dominance, and things end there in chapter 12, and now we go to chapter 13, and we really focus a lot on the tumultuousness. That was not the word that I was planning on using, but the chaos within David's family and his family life. And all of this is a result of his sinfulness. Our sin leads to certain consequences, and this is definitely a consequence of David's sinfulness. Excuse me. So chapter 13, we have two of David's children, and a lot of times, remember, these children are not full siblings. Many times they're half siblings because David had lots of wives. This is Amnon and Tamar. Amnon loved Tamar, and that was Absalom's sister. So you have Amnon, David's son, Absalom, David's son, and Tamar, Absalom's sister, or David's daughter. Amnon was infatuated with Tamar and wanted to basically have sex with her. Break it down pretty simply. And so he comes up with this plan, or a friend of him's come up with his plan, says, tell the king that you're very sick and that you need your sister to come and comfort you. And so that happens, and he asks the sister, Tamar, to sleep with him. She says no, and then so he forces her and he rapes her. Just horrible. I mean, it's just unbelievable, that would happen. And sadly, things like that continue to happen today because sin is sin, and there's nothing new under the sun. And so we see that I do want to read verse 14. It says, however, he would not heed her voice, and being stronger than she, he forced her and lay with her. And then verse 15, then Amnon hated her exceedingly, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Amnon said to her, arise and be gone. And then Tamar says that, of course, everything that you've done is horrible. She openly is mourning. She put ashes on her head. That was ashes were considered unclean. So whenever you were doing that, you were kind of putting on, the uncleanliness of the ashes as representation of how you felt and the grief that you were going through. She also tore her clothes. That's another thing that was revealing the grief that she had. It says, but King David heard all of these things. He was very angry, but Absalom was kind of, if you read between the lines, you kind of realize, okay, he's obviously already plotting something. It says, Absalom spoke to his brother Amnon, neither good nor bad. Absalom hated Amnon because he had forced his sister Tamar. Right, so he's not outwardly showing that he is overly angry, but within him he is. And that leads, you continue, where Absalom sets up a trap for Amnon and murders Amnon. It's kind of interesting. David thinks at first that Absalom has killed all of his sons, but that is not the case. It is only Amnon. And we see at the end of chapter 13, it says, "But Absalom fled and went to Talmai in Geshur, and David mourned for his son every day. So Absalom fled and went to Geshur and was there for 3 years. King David longed to go to Absalom, for he had been comforted concerning Amnon because he was dead." So it's kind of this weird thing. David doesn't take care of the issue himself. There doesn't appear to be punishment for Amnon. So David is just allowing this horrible stuff to go on, but he's saddened by it because he knows it's wrong. And he thinks that the consequence of that is that Absalom kills all of his sons. So Absalom thinks the king will be coming after him, so he leaves. But David actually wouldn't have forced Absalom to leave. It's just a mess of a family situation. As good as a king as David was, he was doing a horrible job as a father. So finally, chapter 14 talks about Absalom's return to Jerusalem. Joab, David's main general, actually kind of uses a woman to go and to talk to David and basically convince David that it's okay now for Absalom to come back. And so Absalom returns to Jerusalem, but he does not see the king for another couple of years. And then you keep going, and Absalom. It's kind of an interesting thing. Absalom summons Joab because he wants to now be able to go and see David and see the king. Joab doesn't listen to him twice, so Absalom has his men burn a field of Joab's. So then Joab pays attention then, and he goes to Absalom, and Absalom asks him, "I want to go back, and I want to see the king, see my father." So he goes back there at the end of chapter 14. It says, "So Joab went to the king and told him, and when he had called for Absalom, he came to the king, bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom." So there was some forgiveness there. You kind of get the feeling that there would have been forgiveness a long time ago, but neither party really reached out to the other. They didn't want to fix the issue, and I think we see that in our own lives, that we make assumptions about what other people are thinking, and what their intentions are, and we just assume that to be true. It's a lot healthier to go ahead and try to resolve those issues. Sometimes they can't be resolved, but David and Absalom obviously have a difficult relationship here, but it does have some forgiveness. But that leads us to chapter 15. So after this happens, Absalom is a little freer, within the empire, if you will, and so he starts basically garnering support. And as you read this, you'll see that it was obviously a plan for him to start bringing support away from David and to him, and kind of subtly getting people to question David's authority and leadership. And in fact, in verse 12. Says, "And the conspiracy grew strong, for the people with Absalom continually increased in number." So Absalom is beginning a quiet underground revolution. And eventually he gets a large number of people to support him, and Jerusalem is threatened. And so David actually flees Jerusalem. And there's why he did that. It was, to make sure that the city wasn't destroyed, to protect the people. He didn't want to fight Absalom. It just shows David's weakness in his leadership when it comes to his family. And now it's spilling out in the way that he is ruling the people. And so you see David leaves. You're introduced to a guy named Ittai the Gittite. This was basically conscripted army, but Ittai the Gittite showed great loyalty to David and came with David, and we get to the end of chapter 14 here, no, excuse me, 15, and I thought this was interesting. This is verse 31. It says, "Then someone told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." Right, so he is praying that God will turn the counsel that Absalom receives into foolishness, so that this plot will eventually fail. And I think David is, from the beginning, he wants this to resolve itself with Absalom not dying. Right, that's probably why he didn't fight Absalom at the beginning, and so he clearly desires for Absalom to live through this. We are introduced at this time to another guy, Hushai. He actually goes back, as you read there. He will go back and also become a counselor to Absalom, but yet he is loyal to David. So he's kind of a spy that we see. Right now, I encourage you to read Psalm 3. Psalm 3 is specifically, it's labeled, it's a psalm of David when he fled from Absalom, his son. Part of that really I really liked was verse 5 to the end. It says, "I lay down and slept. I awoke, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for you have struck all my enemies on the cheekbone. You have broken the teeth of the ungodly. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing is upon your people." All right, so he's acknowledging that he's surrounded, but he is putting his trust solely in the Lord. Then we have chapter 16. This is interesting as David is fleeing and continues to be moving away from Absalom. He runs into Ziba. Remember, Ziba was from the house of Saul, who David was kind to. This is the servant of Mephibosheth. And Ziba is there and gives lots of aid to David. And then the king said, "And where is your master's son?" Talking about Mephibosheth. And Ziba said to the king, "Indeed, he is staying in Jerusalem. For he said, today the house of Israel will restore the kingdom of my father to me." Isn't that interesting? The love that David has shown to Mephibosheth when he saw an opportunity to maybe regain some power, he decided he was going to take it rather than be loyal to David. And so the king said to Ziba, "Here, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is now yours." And Ziba said, "I humbly bow before you that I may find favor in your sight, O Lord, my king." So David, I mean, can you imagine? He made a promise to Jonathan. He keeps that. But then Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, turns his back completely on David. So David continues to reward Saul's household, though, by giving all of the things that were deserved by Mephibosheth to Ziba the servant. So then we continue, and we have there's a guy named Shimei. He is a Benjamite, that's the tribe of Saul. So he hated David, and he was cursing David to the point that David's men were like, "We'll just go kill that guy." And David's response is pretty interesting. He says, "Let him alone and let him curse. For so the Lord has ordered him. It may be that the Lord will look on my affliction, and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing this day." So rather than David getting angry and striking out and punishing the guy or killing the guy, which would have been the normal thing that a king would do, David says, "You know what? Maybe God is going to use this in a way, and that he can bring some good about this." That's a tough, but it's a healthy attitude for us to have, rather than being enraged by people who are mocking us, who are wishing us harm, rather than becoming consumed with them and being angry towards them. Maybe we should take that as, okay, you know what, maybe God will bring some good about out of the frustrating situation that I'm going through now. Then we have Psalm 7, which is actually kind of connected, it appears, to this interaction with this Benjamite who is cursing David. And this psalm is a prayer and praise for deliverance from enemies. It ends, verse 14, "Behold, the wicked bring forth iniquity. Yes, he conceives trouble and brings forth falsehood. He made a pit and dug it out. He has fallen into the ditch which he made. His trouble shall return upon his own head, and his violent dealing shall come down on his own crown. I will praise the Lord according to his righteousness. I will sing praise to the name of the Lord Most High." All right, so we see that. I encourage you to read Psalm 7. Then we continue in the end of chapter 16 in 2 Samuel. You see the two advisors, Ahithophel and Hushai. So Ahithophel is fully on Absalom's side. And so what he recommends Absalom doing is making sure people know that Absalom is considered the king now. And so what he does is he takes David's concubines and he sleeps with them. That was a cultural symbol that, okay, this is now my household. So he does that, and then Ahithophel recommends that rather than going and fighting David's whole army, that they go and they find and kill David only, and not all the other people. That way that maybe can keep a civil war from happening if he just kills David. That's actually probably was the wise advice. But there's also Hushai, who, remember, is a spy for David. And so the advice that he gives is that, no, you should make this a clear victory and go and destroy all of David's army, and you should go with him as well, Absalom. You should be leading that charge and the army. Remember what David had prayed for, that there would be foolishness that was counseled to Absalom. So what Hushai does, Absalom listens to Hushai. It says, verse 14, "So Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the advice of Hushai is better than the advice of Ahithophel, for the Lord had purposed to defeat the good advice of Ahithophel to the intent that the Lord might bring disaster on Absalom." All right, so God is involved here, foiling the plans of Absalom. So Hushai warns David to escape, gives him a heads up, so David is able to pull back and then gather his army and be ready. So in chapter 18, we see that they fight and that David's army is victorious. This is one of the most interesting death stories, I think, in the Bible. Absalom is on a mule, trying to ride away, save his life. If you remember earlier reading, maybe last week, that Absalom had really heavy hair, real thick hair. He would shave it every year, and it would be really heavy. Well, clearly it was very thick at this point. It gets tangled in the tree, and the mule keeps going. It's kind of like one of these old Western comedies or something. The hair gets caught in the tree, the mule keeps going, and Absalom's just hanging there. And so David had requested specifically that to go easy on Absalom. Well, some of Joab's men tell him, say, "Hey, Absalom is caught in the tree," and Joab says, "Well, did you kill him?" And they're like, "No, David said not to do that." And Joab was like, "I don't care." He gets 3 spears and he puts them through Absalom's heart. So Joab kills Absalom. And the very end of chapter 18, David hears the news, and he is heartbroken. It says, "Then the king was deeply moved and went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And as he wept, he said, 'Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died in your place. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son.'" All right, we're going to stop there. I encourage you to read the next few verses. We'll go to at least chapter 23, so 19 through 23, and then probably 1 Chronicles 18 as well for next Tuesday. But we're going to see how David's mismanagement with his family is also going to cause some problem with his management of the country as well. So I hope you have a wonderful week, and we will see you again on Tuesday. Have a great weekend.